The new Catherine Pooler release, April Brings Showers, is out. And what comes with showers? Well, of course, rainbows. So I thought, why not use rainbows as my inspiration to create these cards today? I'm showing you 4 different ways to add a rainbow, whether it's traditional or in ink blended or stripes, to your cards for some fun, colourful, bright cards to send out. I'm Verity and welcome to my channel Pretty Little Button, where I make paper crafting tutorials for the everyday crafter. So for this first card I'm going to use a new Slimline die, and I wanted to create an ink blended background for the Slimline die to sit on. I'm going to keep that white so there's a nice pop of contrast against the rainbow. And so I'm using ink blending to create a lovely rainbow background. Now I started off using Party Dress as the first colour in the party collection. This is a lovely pink, and I'm blending it into Samba. Now it's really useful to ensure that you get a nice smooth blend by ink blending off a smooth surface onto the card and using a circular motion as well. I'm using the blending tool and foam pad because I really want an intense colour, and this lays down the ink quickly as opposed to a blending brush, which takes a little bit more time to build up the colour and also can appear a bit more lighter in appearance, but I really wanted a nice bright vibrant colour. I then went on to Orange Twist and then Limoncello, and as I said, these are all in the party collection, so you know they're going to be nice bright vibrant colours when you use them all together. You can mix the spa and the party if you want to, it's entirely up to you. They do tend to be kept slightly separate because the party are the vibrant colours and the spa are the more muted tones. I'm then going in with Lime Ricky, which is a gorgeous green, and I'm blending this into Deck the Halls. Don't worry if you don't get the perfect blend because this is going behind something, so you're not going to see all those imperfections if your blending is not perfect. A great way to try and improve that is to go back between the colours and just blend the colours where they transition, and that will help you get a much more smoother blend. Once I've finished with Deck the Halls, I'm then going in with Something Borrowed, which is a really beautiful blue, though I have to say Suede Shoes is my favourite party blue. And this blends beautifully into the Deck the Halls. And then I'm using one of the newer inks that were released, and this is Drive-In, which is a beautiful sort of indigo blue. I absolutely love this colour. It's like a purpley blue, blends beautifully into the Suede Shoes, and then I'm finishing it off at the end with Flirty Fuchsia. So that's kind of a fuchsia purple pink, and that blends beautifully into the Drive-In. So at the end, as you can see, I've got a beautiful rainbow blended background, and I'm going to pop that behind a die cut. So I'm using the Light Sunburst die cut, cover plate die. This is a Slimline die, and I've die cut it 3 times. And to add just a little bit more interest and variation, I'm going to cut apart 2 of the layers to create my own pattern. And I'm going to layer these up in 3D dimensions, just to give it a bit more interest. And I'm just looking at the pattern and just deciding where I want to cut the lines to create an interesting looking pattern to it. So for the top layer, I'm kind of cutting around more towards the middle and creating a flower, but I still want to create the elongation of the slimline, so I do cut out around it. Now you can choose any pattern you want, you don't have to follow the pattern I chose, go with whatever you prefer. But once I've cut them all, I'm then using some foam tape behind the die cuts and adhering them on top of each other. And then to finish this card off, I heat embossed a sentiment from the Bloomin Wellies stamp set, which has been released from Catherine Pooler's April Brings Showers. It's in the Calling for Drizzle bundle. And I just heat embossed this and foam mounted that on top of the card. So for the next set of cards, I'm going to use some of the Spa Collection inks. So these are the more muted tones, but I want to show you that you can use the muted tones inks to create rainbows too. They've got a different feel to them, different look, but still create a rainbow. So I'm just going through the colours that I'm using here so you can see them all within the Spa Collection. And then to create these, I'm just using the direct to paper method of swiping my ink pad onto some cardstock. I'm only doing small areas because I only need some thin cardstock strips, so I don't want to waste too much of my ink and too much of my card. If there's any areas where I'm not getting the perfect coverage of ink, it may be that my ink pad is starting to dry out and I just use my re-inker to re-ink the pad. So here you can see some of the yellows and the oranges that I'm using to create some ink card strips. Once I've created all my panels, I then using my guillotine to cut out 1/4 inch strips. And I'm just doing this in all of the colours, and I end up getting about 3 strips of each colour when I've done this. Then going to use these to create 2 cards. So one is going to be a slimline card and one is going to be a normal A5 card, so that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So this is the first card that I'm using, and as you can see I'm just taking each of the colours and I'm just using some liquid adhesive to apply them down. Now I'm using my grid mat to try and keep them nice and straight and as aligned as possible, and because of the number, I think I used about 9 or 10 colours for these rainbows, I can fit a whole rainbow pattern all the way down this card. I'm leaving about 1/4 inch in between the strips, so that just mimics the size of the strips that I've cut as well. I then cut this panel down to size and add it to a flat card base, and then I have heat embossed onto vellum a lot of the raindrops from the Pitter Patter stamp set. I've added some adhesive to the back of those and added them on within a heat embossed sentiment from the Pitter Patter stamp set, and this just gives a really fun and interesting look to the card. For the slimline card, I am then using those strips but on a diagonal, and I'm going to do a whole rainbow array from one side to the other, but then on the ends I'm then staggering the strips down just to give it a little bit more interest, and so it's not one whole panel of rainbow, it's got a bit of variation. Now don't worry that they overhang the edge, that's okay, because what I'll do at the end is then I'll trim those off to align with the edge of the card panel, and I did trim this down to a smaller size just so that I could add this onto a card base. I hadn't quite positioned the stripes in the middle of the panel, so that's why it's smaller than a slimline card, because I want to try and centre those stripes more so. I added a heat embossed welly from the Bloomin Wellies stamp set, and I heat embossed this in the navy embossing powder. Added this to the front of the card with a sentiment as well. And I just really loved how the rainbow is a bit more muted behind the wellies, but it gives it a bit of interest and variation and colour. So this last card, I actually used the inks to create a traditional looking rainbow. So I've got some nesting dies here, and I'm just taking every other one out and die cutting these out some white cardstock. And then once I've got them, I am then going to colour each of the circles. So I've created like a circle frame, each of the circle frames in an ink pad. And I've used some Party Collection inks as well for this. So there's only about 7, because I think I've only got about 7 rainbows, 7 colours there for this card. So I use Pixie Dust, which is a lovely, lovely pink. And all I'm doing is smushing the cardstock down onto the ink pad, and then I'm using the end of a pencil just to smush it down a bit more firmly to ensure I get a really good coverage. And then I'm picking up with some tweezers because I didn't want to try and get too much of the ink on my fingers really. The next colour I then go in with is Serenade. So this is one of the newer Catherine Puller inks. It's a beautiful, beautiful, lovely, soft purpley blue. Then I'm going in with It's a Boy. I've then got In the Park, which is again one of the newer inks. I'm then using Chiffon, Tiki Torch, and then the last colour I'm finishing off with a sort of red, pinky red, is Dozy Do, again one of the newer inks as well. So these are all lovely and vibrant, and I have created a rainbow circle basically of frames with all of these inks. Now once you line them all up together, it looks great, it's beautiful, but it's not the traditional rainbow because I need half a semicircle. So what I'm going to do is then cut these in half just quite easily with my trimmer, basically eyeballing it. You can be precise if you want to, but I just eyeballed it. And then to adhere them all together, I'm just adding them to a strip of cardstock with some double-sided tape and positioning them in place. And then I can trim off any of the excess of that cardstock, and it just keeps all of those pieces together. Now once I've done this, you can see I've not got a perfectly lovely straight edge to the bottom, which is not the end of the world. I have no problem with that because I can use my guillotine just to trim that and straighten that off. And there you have a really simple, bright and fun rainbow, and you didn't need any fancy dies, just some circle dies to create it. Now I decided I wanted to add this to a card base. I was looking at the vertical version, but in the end I decided to go horizontally, and I'm using the Pitter Patter stamp set again. So these are all the raindrops that I used on the previous card, and then I'm using just the smaller raindrops that are sort of like a cluster of raindrops, and I'm going to stamp these directly onto the card base in black ink. I chose black rather than blue because I really wanted a contrast between the pop of colour, bright colour from the rainbow on the white card. And I just stamped this in several different places. I found that what was a great idea was to keep repositioning that rainbow in place just so I can see where I wanted to place my raindrops. Now I stamped them in midnight ink because I really wanted a lovely, bright, strong, vibrant black ink. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video. It has shown you a variety of different ways to add some rainbows into your cards, as well as some of the newer products from Catherine Pooler's April Showers Bring release. This features a lot of products from the Calling for Drizzle bundle. You can find links to the products used in today's video in the description box below. If you enjoyed today's video, why not give it a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments below which out of these 3 cards is your favourite. For me, I think it has to be the last one. I absolutely love that bold, simple rainbow with those black raindrops. Until next time, happy crafting!